You're listening to Midlife Side Quest, the Over the Hill Gaming Podcast. Here's your host, John Wall.
It's Thursday, February 22nd, and welcome to another episode of Midlife Side Quest, the Over the Hill video game podcast. My name is John Wall, and every week I bring you the latest gaming impressions, industry news, and tales of a Gen X geek delivered to you in 15 minutes to fit your busy life. I am happy to have you here today because on this episode, it is all about reliving the 90s. So I'm going to be talking about Tomb Raider Remastered. And to make sure that you never miss an episode, you can subscribe to the show, which is available on pretty much all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And I would greatly appreciate it if while you're there, you left a review for the show, because that really helps to spread the word. Also, if you'd like to chat about today's show or just talk about games or talk about whatever, you can find me on Threads by searching for Midlife Side Quest. So every week I open the episode by sending out some positive vibes. It's a special shout out to somebody whom I admire and appreciate in an attempt to spread some good energy throughout the gaming community. And this week's vibes are going out to Bo DeMayo, and I hope I said that right. DeMayo is a writer and producer who has worked on shows like The Witcher and Moon Knight, and he's also the showrunner on X-Men 97, which is the sequel to the original 90s animated series that we can all hum the theme song to. I'm not going to do it. Last week, they showed the first trailer for this series, and man, they totally nailed the look and the sound and the feel of the show. If you were a fan of the old X-Men cartoon, this is absolutely a must-see and is going to tickle that nostalgia funny bone. It's basically the 6th season of the show, and it picks up right where they left off back in 1997. So X-Men 97 debuts on Disney Plus on March 20th. So congrats to Bo DeMayo on what looks like an awesome show. So when people talk about the best years ever in video games, there's one year that almost always gets plenty of votes, and that's 1996. Looking back to what came out in that 12-month span is kind of amazing. You had Pokemon Red and Blue, Super Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot, Super Mario RPG, Diablo, Resident Evil, Quake, Parappa the Rapper, just a huge list of all-time greats. And one of the biggest games to come out of that year was undoubtedly Tomb Raider. The adventures of Lara Croft took heavy inspiration from Indiana Jones, if Indy wore super short shorts and had a huge pair of guns. The game was a massive hit, and it kicked off a franchise that would sell over 95 million copies and be adapted into films and comics, and there's even an upcoming animated series that's coming out on Netflix this year. It's hard to overstate just how big of a cultural impact Lara Croft had, especially in the late 90s. Those early Tomb Raider games were a huge inspiration on other games for years to come. We might not have Uncharted or Horizon if it wasn't for Lara Croft. She helped to pioneer the early 3D action-adventure genre, one which has evolved greatly in the decades since. And while we continue to get new Tomb Raider adventures these days, I've often wondered how those original games would hold up. As revolutionary as they were at the time, revisiting early 3D games can oftentimes be a stark reminder of how far we've come and how much we have improved pretty much everything in game design. Well, last week I was lucky enough to receive a review code for the new Tomb Raider Remastered, which packages the original trilogy into a shiny new package. So now I can see for myself how these classics hold up and how this new collection succeeds at polishing them up for new audiences. The first thing to know is that unlike 2007's Tomb Raider Anniversary, which remade the first game from scratch, this is the original game that you remember from the 90s. It's got the same cinematics, it's got the same music and voice acting and the same gameplay. So don't go into this looking for some modern reinvention of that original game. Lara still runs, rolls, climbs, and shoots the way she did on the PS1, which is great for nostalgia's sake. Jumping into that first level in Peru was like seeing that best friend from middle school that you hadn't seen in years, and you're filled with all sorts of great memories like no time had passed. But it's clear pretty quickly that they haven't aged particularly well. Lara feels kind of clunky to control, with imprecise movement, which makes the platforming tricky and the enemy encounters frustrating. They thankfully have added the option to switch to modern analog controls as opposed to the old school, tank controls. And it does feel quite a bit better. In addition to moving better, they remap the buttons in a way that makes more sense, like moving the shooting controls to the triggers. And that definitely helps, but it also doesn't feel great because at the end of the day, they're slapping new controls onto an already existing framework. So it feels kind of like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit right. I often found myself on a ledge or a platform with not a lot of room to maneuver, and it's clear that it was designed with the old tank controls in mind, where you just kind of tap to kind of position yourself. So the new controls are nice in certain wide open spaces, but in others, it's actually trickier and more difficult. It's tough because neither one of them really feels right. The more impressive enhancements are to the game's visuals and to its performance. Anyone who played the original on the PS1 will remember that those games ran pretty rough. They would chug and dip down to like 10 frames per second or some nonsense. But this new version runs silky smooth and it looks really sharp. And the redone textures and character models all look nice while still keeping true to the original vision. It doesn't look like, a game made in 2024, but it looks like a well-polished 20-year-old game. And it is neat that you can press a button at any time in the middle of the action to switch back and forth between the original graphics and the new ones, so you can compare as you go along. That's pretty cool to do. I do think it would have been nice to see some work go into the cinematics. If they would have done those from scratch, that would have been cool, but they seem pretty much untouched. It was amusing to see my daughter watch that first cinematic and react to the original 3D render of Lara and some of her more notorious features. I think her exact words were, "Oh my God, why does she look like that?" Despite being a bit rough to play, it's still a collection of three of my favorite action games of that generation. Iconic moments like the T-Rex in the Lost Valley, the Midas Palace, and Venice are all still there, and those are high points of the entire franchise. Those are still great, great levels. I do think that if you haven't played these games before, this might not be the best pick for you, and you're probably better off checking out the actual remake with Tomb Raider Legend. If you're an old timer like me, though, there is some fun in seeing these games as they originally released almost, 30 years ago nearly. Hearing that classic soundtrack and revisiting those iconic levels was a nice dose of nostalgia, although I don't see myself playing through any of these games in their entirety. And I know I've been spoiled by what Digital Eclipse is doing, but it would have been super cool to get some behind the scenes material, interviews with the original developers, concept art, anything really. If it was presented as a digital exhibit with a comprehensive look at the history of Tomb Raider, I would have enjoyed that a whole lot more. As it is, it's a cool little collection of some old games that's nice to experience for a short while if you're a fan of the series. But they haven't aged very gracefully, and unless you're among the most hardcore fans of Lara Croft, you might struggle to find the fun. In keeping with the retro theme of today's episode, last week I went and saw Madonna in concert as part of her Celebration tour, and I have 3 takeaways from that experience. First of which is to go see the artists that you like. I'm getting to the age where a lot of the musicians I grew up with are either no longer touring or no longer living. So go see them while you can. I got to check out Guns N' Roses, get that off my bucket list a couple of years ago. And I have tickets to go see Aerosmith, although that's been postponed due to Steven Tyler's health issues. Secondly, I hope that when I am 65 years old, I have the energy to dance on stage for nearly 3 hours while a dozen half-naked men gyrate all over me. I mean, I don't want to do that, specifically, but I hope I have that kind of energy. Because right now, I barely have the energy to go for a walk around the block. And third, please remind me that if I ever get the idea again to go to a concert on a Tuesday night that I know likely won't get out until nearly 1 a.m., take the next day off of work. Please. I've got lots of vacation hours saved up. Plenty. It's no big deal. Take the day off. Last week for Polling at Threads, I asked you what was the most that you'd be willing to pay per person for a nice, fancy sit-down dinner. The majority of you, 35%, said that your price range is between $50 and $100. 28% said that you'll spend between $100 and $200. 24% said $50 or below. And a whopping 13% of you are ballers and are willing to spend over $200 a piece. And to those of you who chose that option, please invite me to dinner with you. You're buying, of course. So this week's question is, which of these 90s cartoons would you like to see get another season? We'll say Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man, Gargoyles, or Batman Beyond. Go find me on Threads at Midlife SideQuest and cast your vote, and I'll share the results next week. And if you haven't made the move to Threads yet, you're missing out. Of all the social media networks run by megalomaniacal billionaires, it's definitely the slightly less evil. Thank you for listening to Midlife Side Quest. I appreciate you making time in your day for me. Don't forget, you can catch a new episode of the show every Thursday morning wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can show your support by subscribing and leaving a review. And if you'd like to chat, look for Midlife Side Quest on Threads. So until next week, be well and happy gaming.